So imagine you're driving down the road at night. When in your headlights you see this strange creature. It looks a lot like a man, but with a giant set of wings and red glowing eyes. What do? Welcome to Cryptid Crossings. Today we're discussing the Enigma of the Mothman. This legendary creature that's haunted towns from West Virginia all the way to Chicago, with a couple of visits overseas. From its chilling origins in Point Pleasant to modern day sightings in urban landscapes, we're going to take a look at the Mothman, what it is, where it came from, and what's it doing here. The Mothman is a creature that's often described as a large winged humanoid figure, standing about 6 to 7 feet tall with a wingspan of 10 to 15 feet. Its most stark characteristic is that of its red glowing eyes. Typically said to resemble either a bird or a bat, this creature's body is portrayed as dark and black, capable of seamlessly blending into the shadows. Witnesses describe its eyes as hypnotic, saying that it can induce a sense of paralysis or freeze you with fear. When it flies, some accounts say that it has a whooshing sound to it, while others say it just kind of hums. And when it takes off, it has the capability to launch itself vertically, like a helicopter, straight into the air. It's most often been reported near areas of impending disaster, giving credence to the belief that this might be a harbinger of doom when it appears. And its appearances are frequently accompanied by other strange occurrences and general feelings of unease amongst the population and anyone that is to see it. Now, the sightings began in November of 1966 in West Virginia. The first documented sighting was reported by a National Guardsman who was in a nearby wildlife area when he saw this strange half-man, half-bird creature perched in a tree. Following that, just a few days later, and about 80 miles away, a group of grave diggers reported seeing this creature fly overhead, described it again as kind of a half-bird, half-human looking thing. Then the most infamous sighting occurred November 15th, 1966. Two young couples were in the T&T area just northeast of Point Pleasant along the Ohio River. This was a local munitions facility used in World War II. Now, as these two couples were driving back, they reported that in their headlights, they saw a figure in the road. And at first it looked like a human, until they saw the giant set of wings and the red glowing eyes. They described the creature as standing 6 to 7 feet tall with a 10-foot wingspan and eyes that glowed through the night. Said that it seemed to want to avoid the headlights of the car. As they sped away, the Mothman seemed to give chase. The car reached speeds of up to 100 miles per hour, with the creature staying on pace with the vehicle the entire time. Following that encounter, the Gettysburg Times reported 8 additional sightings over the next 3 days of the same creature. This included 2 volunteer firefighters who claimed to have seen a huge bird with glowing red eyes. Then over the course of the following year, at least 100 more sightings were reported to local media. All these sightings claimed the creature was this bat-like, bird-like, human-like thing that they knew was not natural, with red glowing eyes and an enormous wingspan. And then, just over a year later, on December 15, 1967, the Silver Bridge collapsed. The Silver Bridge connected Point Pleasant to a neighboring town in Ohio over the Ohio River. It was said to carry around 3,500 to 4,000 cars daily during that time. The bridge itself, it was built to accommodate cars that were much lighter than the cars of that modern time. When it was built, the cars averaged about 1,500 pounds. And in the 1960s, your modern car was weighing about 4,000 pounds. And the build of the bridge was so that if one piece failed, the rest of it was going to fail. Now on December 15th, during rush hour, a single eye-bar on the top on the Ohio side of the bridge cracked. When it did, it snapped the chain. And as soon as the chain snapped, the entire bridge plummeted into the icy river below. That day, 46 people died, either from being crushed by the rubble, hypothermia, or just drowning. Some claim that they saw the Mothman perched on the bridge just before the disaster. And while the official cause was a structural failure, many couldn't shake the feeling that the Mothman sightings that had occurred were an ominous warning. Many people report just strange and mysterious things that occur when the Mothman's around. One witness back in West Virginia claimed that he had these mysterious patterns on his television and he heard this noise outside and he shines a flashlight and sees these red glowing eyes just staring at him through the window. Strange occurrences with car radios when it's around. And one of the strangest things that might be associated with the Mothman is the story of Indrid Cold. Indrid Cold, also known as the Grinning Man, was this figure that appeared in West Virginia right around the Mothman sightings. The story goes that Woodrow Derenberger was driving his truck one night when he had to fix a piece of equipment in the back of it. He got out, worked on it a little bit, got back in his truck and went to pull forward. And when he did, he noticed lights out in the horizon. And he thinks it's a police car, but when he gets closer, he notices an aircraft that looks like, as he puts it, a kerosene lamp chimney. He said that this man steps out and approaches the truck. At first, it seemed like a normal human, except he had this crazy grin on his face, just ear-to-ear grin. And he walked with his hands tucked up in his armpits. And when he spoke, the smile never left his face because he was communicating telepathically. He had him roll down the window of the truck and started to speak to him through his mind. And he just said, "Don't be afraid. We mean you no harm. We only wish you happiness." Then he told him that his name was Cold. And after that sighting, other people came forward and said they had similar sightings of this man, with one witness saying he was just too frightened he couldn't even stop when he saw him. And then from there, these sightings started to occur in areas that were not Point Pleasant. In Freiburg, Germany, miners reported seeing a creature that they called the Freiburg Shrieker before a mine collapse in 1978. Now, this entity was said to have warned these workers away from danger of the mine collapsing, potentially saving lives. It was described as having large wings with a humanoid figure and red glowing eyes. And then in 1986, in Chernobyl, the Mothman was apparently sighted. Known as the Black Bird of Chernobyl, it was described as a 6-foot-tall beast with large wings and red glowing eyes. After the Mothman was spotted in Chernobyl, the famous nuclear meltdown occurred. And in the days leading up, there were several workers that said that they had seen this creature flying overhead. And those who witnessed it, they were plagued with nightmares, weird, mysterious phone calls occurring, just lending to the creature's reputation of being this mysterious harbinger of doom. But then in 2017, reports started coming in from Chicago, which typically your urban environment isn't really a place that you're going to find a lot of cryptids. They're typically going to be more out in the rural areas. But since that time, over 55 reports of this creature have been received in Chicago, primarily around the O'Hare Airport and Lake Michigan. One witness says that he saw this weird pterodactyl-like creature flying awkwardly below a plane on its approach to O'Hare. Strange indeed. Lon Strickler documented these Chicagoland sightings in his book Mothman Dynasty: Chicago's Winged Humanoids, and noted consistencies with the Point Pleasant Mothman, but also said that this one didn't seem to be quite as aggressive as that one. So what is the Mothman? Is it just some misidentification, or is it an actual creature that exists amongst us? Well, one common explanation is that of a sandhill crane. Now, the sandhill crane, it's a large bird. It typically stands around 3 feet tall to maybe 4.5 feet tall. So it is much shorter than your typical description of the Mothman, standing 6 to 7 feet tall. And sandhill cranes do have large wingspans. They're around 5.5 to 7.5 feet, which is still a little smaller than what's typically said the Mothman wingspan is. And another popular theory of it being a bird is that of a barred owl, which is a larger nocturnal bird. So that makes sense why they're seeing it out there at night. Now, the barred owl is much smaller than a sandhill crane. It's about 1.5 feet to maybe 2 feet tall, and its wingspan is about 3 feet to maybe 4 feet wide. Now, another explanation for the Mothman phenomena is mass hallucination, maybe something brought on by exposure to toxic chemicals, which Point Pleasant wasn't a stranger to. Or even in that vein, maybe it's a mutated animal, or maybe this is an interdimensional being. It's actually terrestrial, but just not from this dimension. Or another explanation is that of Cornstalk's curse. Cornstalk was a leader of a Shawnee tribe there in West Virginia. In October of 1777, Cornstalk visited Fort Randolph in what is today known as Point Pleasant, West Virginia. He had come to seek release of a couple of his warriors who had been detained at the fort during the American Revolution. On November 10th, an American militiaman was killed by an unknown Native American, and in retaliation, the soldiers took the Native Americans that were being held, including Cornstalk, and executed them. And it said that when Cornstalk was dying, he put a curse on the land for the next 200 years. But whatever it is, Mothman's influence extends way beyond just sightings. There's a book by John Keel called The Mothman Prophecies, which remains a classic in paranormal literature. It lays out an unsettling account of everything that went on in Point Pleasant during the Mothman sightings. This was made into a movie starring Richard Gere of the same name, The Mothman Prophecies, and that explores all the events happening in Point Pleasant, West Virginia at the time. Then there are documentaries like The Mothman of Point Pleasant, which dives into the impact on the rural community. And then every year in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, the Mothman Festival is held. They celebrate the Mothman with vendor exhibits, live music, and guided tours of key locations like the TNT area there in Point Pleasant. This festival draws between 10 and 15,000 people every year. They come to explore the cryptid lore firsthand and see the iconic Bob Roach metallic Mothman statue. As the mystery of the Mothman continues, nothing but questions remain. Is this a misidentified animal, figment of our imagination? Is it a warning system? Or is it just something that we're not yet capable of understanding? Leave your theories in the comments below. Have you had an encounter with the Mothman or any other cryptid? Reach out to me at cryptidcrossings@gmail.com. I'd love to hear your story, and we might even feature you on a future episode. Don't forget to subscribe for more cryptid encounters. Until next time, stay curious. You never know what lurks in the shadows.